Alright, welcome back everyone to Terra Invicta, and today I'm hoping that we will hire a 6th councillor, clear the treason modifier from Kamya, who I should rename once she is no longer a traitor, possibly after a patron, and we should also talk about early game space defense. So I'm going to jump into it straight away. I will say I've been thinking about Poland. If it was anyone other than the Resistance or Exodus, I would probably be launching a coup there right now and absorbing it. This 7 mission control would be a tremendous asset because remember, you don't pay upkeep on ground-based mission control, whereas I pay a lot of upkeep on my space-based mission control. I can build space-based stuff much quicker, but this is a huge income right here. This is Wow, yeah, this would basically double my effective monthly income versus building that extra mission control in space. You can see my money number is already trending towards zero. I'm happy to run it mildly negative because I can always trade stuff for money. But yeah, I would absorb Poland into the Eurasian Federation in a heartbeat. The reason I don't do it is one, it's the resistance, and two, if you look at the resistance, their existence benefits us, right? They're currently at their, or very close to their MC cap. If I take away their 7 from Poland, they're going to go deep into the negative. So if they ever lose Poland, I'll probably grab it. But for the moment, I'm going to give it a bit of a reprieve. Now, here's a little nifty trick if you've got reserve mission control and you don't want to pay the exorbitant cash cost for just a little bit of extra science. So if we shut this down, we go from 2.6 to 2.5 extra science. Very, very small reduction, but we save a reasonable amount of money. You don't save the waters and the volatiles. That is stuff that's required to keep the crew alive. The crew is still there even if you shut down the module. But you do save the cash and the metal inputs. So you can, if you want to save some cash, shut down these modules and save money. It's up to you as to whether you want to run them in order to generate science or whether you want to shut them down in order to save. For the moment, just to demonstrate, I'm going to mothball this station. And we can always come back to it if we need to. I don't believe the aliens are provoked by MC capacity so much as they're provoked by used MC, which were already pretty high. But I'm going to mothball these stations for the moment anyway. As for back on Earth, the Protectorate is catching up on where they were on China. They'll have taken the whole thing over soon. It's pretty inevitable at this point. They're definitely getting help from the aliens. Absolutely, they're getting help from the aliens. So we'll do some scouting around and try and intervene. Try and also cut down the xenofauna that is in their territory and in servant territory, because the servants never attack xenofauna, and as a result, there's a danger it spawns megafauna in their territory, which ends up destroying a whole bunch of human life. So we're probably going to have to patrol the Middle East for them. Unfortunately, really need that 6th councillor so I can get the 6th set of actions going. Fun times. I'm also researching adamantine armor. This is diamondoid armor, so this is what you get for diamondoids. It's a pretty good armor option, and it's one of the last components I need before I'm comfortable talking about an early sort of hacked together spaceship design in order to defend Earth. Yes, I know it's almost 2030 and we could have gone earlier, but I find my preference is to let the aliens sort of do their thing until you have ships that are sort of viable for countering them, at least in some way, because they will retaliate once we start shooting. Fun times. Well, they've finally done it. That was to be expected. It didn't take them too long. The Protectorate are once again in control of China. Without any CP capacity of myself to be able to contest this, and with all the other AI factions pretty much at their cap, plus with the Protectorate getting help from the aliens in order to break in, yeah, that's happened. So there you go. Now we can feel better, because rolling back the game did not stop us getting to the point where the Protectorate controlled China. The alien-loving bastards. In any case, I'm seriously considering developments going forward. I'm sending a diplomat to the Resistance again because, as I have discovered, it doesn't take that much in terms of gifts to bribe factions back up to tolerance from in conflict if you're only just over the threshold. So my plan is to get the Academy, the Initiative, Exodus, and whatnot all back on my side through minor gifts of resources that I have heaps of, like Boost. The problem is in terms of long-term territorial expansion. One really good option would be, for example, to take eventually United North America, which would allow me to annex Canada, and eventually I can annex Mexico into the United States. That's a great consolidation. And eventually, with forward Russia, I'd be able to continue expanding the Eurasian Union west to absorb more of what is at the moment potentially EU countries, which would require pissing off some people. Particularly, it would require pissing off the resistance, which may not actually be in my interest because I kind of want them in space doing stuff to distract the aliens. This is a situation where what is good for you in terms of building up your own power might not necessarily be a strategic optimum move. So I'm going to give some thought to that as to whether or not at any point I should push the resistance, say, for example, out of Poland or the academy out of Germany, and maybe try and expand the Eurasian Union, or should I risk provoking people in order to grab Canada and its 40 million people and $2 trillion worth of GDP and 5 mission control to merge them into the United States of America? Just a thought. By the way, the US is racing. It hasn't got its visor on right now, so let's hit the button. You'll see this go up. Okay, I was going to check if we could sign a non-aggression pact. Now we're back to tolerant, but yeah, nah, they won't. They know we're too far ahead, so while they're happy to stop attacking us, they're not particularly thrilled with the prospect of, signing an actual formal non-aggression pact. But that's okay. They won't be attacking us anyway. I'm going to go through their orgs quickly to check if there's anything with Inspire, and then I'll be right back. And we have now finished quantum encryption. This is the tech that will unlock the ability to get the sixth counselor, so I am obviously going to do that. In the meantime, however, I've got to think about what I'm doing next. There's a bunch of immediate requirements I have. There are some nice to haves. There are some cheap, easy ones to pick up. But I'm considering starting to put at least one of the global slots towards trying to get fusion reactors going. Fusion reactors are much superior to fission systems in space. And while you can try and focus on improving your fission tech, getting workable fusion is probably something that's worthwhile doing, but it's bloody expensive. So I'm going to think about my easiest path to fusion. I will eventually do a guide on the tech tree in Terra Invicta. While I think the tech tree could be a little better designed visually, the general idea is when you look at the projects, there's the tech, which the tech represents different paths that science can take. And generally, you're going to want a lot of science projects to be completed, but you might not get, for example, all the weapons projects. When you unlock the different projects underneath that, the engineering projects, you're definitely not going to want most of them. You will have seen, for example, that I skip most engine designs, most weapons. I only pick the option at each level that is most suitable for me. That's how it's meant to be. You're meant to focus on the ones that you want to use for your particular playthrough. The ones I pick aren't necessarily the best. But here, even at this level, even though I say you might want most science eventually, there's still some hard choices to make. We're only breaking into the middle layer of the tech tree. We're 1, 2, 3 in. There's 6 or 7 out to the right still. So lots of choices to make. And one of those choices is, are you going to go and try and continue to enhance your fission systems, or are you going to try and break into fusion systems? Are we just going to make the regular nuclear reactors we have as good as possible and use engines and systems that are based on that? Or are you going to try and break into fusion, or the third potential power source, go down the antimatter route? Yeah, antimatter's interesting. If we get to antimatter, that's something I'm going to reserve for later in the playthrough, so I have something cool to talk about each episode. Right now, I'm looking seriously at the pathway that gets us closer towards fusion. The other thing is, do I want to spend time getting great nations? So unity movements, great nations, these are the things that allow you to glue nations together. Do I want to go down that route? It's 10,000 science in order to unlock. And the question is, would we actually use it? And if so, where? Would we continue to expand the Eurasian Union? Are we willing to piss people off in order to do it? Would we expand North America? Are we willing to piss people off in order to do it? Are we willing to expand India? I think we're definitely willing to expand India. So maybe even though this is not optimal, I can be tempted to go down this route. Or at least pick this up. I don't think it gets us anything critical to us immediately, though. Anyway, leave it with me. This is a tough one, because in order for this to be worth it, we really have to pick up the one next to it, which is Great Nations. But that's 35,000 research, and for 35,000 research, I could research inertial confinement fusion. Just a thought. I've also just bought an org, but given a lot of stuff to Project Exodus, so they now are also back in tolerance mode. We can remove one unused org because we are over our limit, are we? No, we're not. Fine. And we're almost ready to recruit our next councillor. So there we are. We've got another faction back to tolerance mode, which means if I do end up picking a fight with someone, I don't want it to be the resistance, but from a strategic perspective, absorbing Canada, absorbing Mexico, absorbing Poland, absorbing the Czech Republic and Slovakia, like all of these are options to really expand our holdings because we're about to get a whole bunch more cap. I can spend some of it by just resuming India's economic growth, but India is enjoying its education binge at the moment. It's almost up to 500 science output, which puts it is, wow, yeah, it has overtaken China. It's quite significantly overtaken China in terms of science output. So yeah, India doing really, really well. We will be finished covert operations in, oh geez, relatively quickly, 5th of June. Awesome. But I think if I run the clock, we're about to finish ferrosites. There we are. Okay, so we have completed the ferrosites project. Where a pheromone is a chemical that can introduce a recipient's behavior, the investigation of this so-called ferrosite reveals that it is an actual living cell. Pheromones' effects wear off relatively quickly. Ferrosites are capable of reproducing in the recipient's body, thereby extending the influence for a significantly longer period of time. When cross-referencing fMRI scans, we find the awake subject's brain exhibits an abnormally high level of theta waves. These are normally only present during REM sleep. For Phil's objective, research for hydroferrosites increases our defenses to being influenced by alien ferrosites, and when people are complaining that their control points are being flipped by the aliens and you can do nothing about it, or you see a control point flip to like the servants and you can't tell why, well, it's because the aliens are using their mind control tech. So we have completed the research hydroferrosites objective. For good or bad, we have got our answer. Our biologists are 99% certain that these ferrosites are how Hydra are able to control their victims. The particles enter the system via the respiratory system or the mucous membranes and make their way to the brain. Once there, they effectively grant the Hydras complete mental control over the target. There doesn't seem to be any limit to it at all. Even suicidally dangerous orders will be carried out without hesitation. All a Hydra needs is time, and it can press gang an army of fanatically loyal slaves. It's what every crazy warlord and tin pot dictator on Earth has dreamed of, soldiers that can't disobey, and the Hydra can make them just by breathing. Remember, the Academy wants us to negotiate with these guys as equals. Awesome. The good news is that ferrosites can be stopped. Standard mop gear provides complete protection. A basic gas mask will work in a pinch. The bad news is that once the ferrosites are in your system, you've got no way to get them out. They do lose effectiveness over time, but given that Hydras will be constantly topping up the ferrosite levels of their slaves, that doesn't help much. But it also means that the ratio between Hydras and the number of slaves they can have is fixed, right? You can't just steadily accumulate an army over time. They can only keep cells of humans near them because they need to keep the ferrosite levels topped up. That explains, I think, why the aliens haven't just already, within a couple of years, overrun Earth. They're limited by the number of Hydra they can actually put on Earth in terms of how many humans they can mind control. That is another reason, I suspect, why they really need factions like the Servants. You need loyal servant human followers who worship you for reasons other than ferrosite control, because there's only so many Hydra going around ferrosite controlling people. Anyway, research team have said they've learned all they can from the body. If we want to find out more, we'll need a live subject. Research Hydra containment when it becomes available. You can bet I will. Now let's see who we can recruit. I don't care about tech for the moment. I'm already at my control cap again. Let's go see if there are any good counselors on offer. Instantly, astronaut with Inspire, amazing. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Why am I looking for an astronaut? What I'm looking for at this stage of the game is I want another command character who has Inspire and can do space operations. And has reasonable admins most of the time. Those characteristics tend to match the astronaut archetype more than others. There's another one down here. This is a famous, cynic, technocratic, prosperous chemist astronaut joining us from Germany. Unfortunately, I believe since he's a cynic, he cannot inspire. This is another one. Connected crew, prosperous astronomer. Admin 6, so 7-6. Can inspire 42. So she's got less administration. She generates more Okay, I'm hiring her. Great. Okay, so you can see instantly we're now up to 370. And as other factions do the same research, you can bet that they're also going to get a boost to their CP limits. So the world is going to become a more contested, more combative place. But let's juice her up. We'll wait for the turn to cycle so we can see the impact in real time. But we're going to be able to drive our CP limit to space. I think I want Marine Assault Unit, and then I want probably Fission Array. Probably. Let's grab Marine Assault Unit. Let's put Adamantine Armor at maximum priority, because that's what's holding back producing our warships. Okay, we're at 373, but I've kept all of these things in reserve for this point. So, admin organization. Admin organization. Where's my next admin organization? Here it is, and here it is. She will eventually level her admin up to 25, but for the moment, let's give her a little bit of help. There we are. She now has 23 administration. That was easy. And then let's give her this to increase our mining output in space. Some more money. That's a lot more money, but let's see what's on the marketplace first, since we have options. Salt alien asset, assassinate, coup d'etat. That could be interesting, just to give her options. There we are, a whole bunch of additional missions. We could afford the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. It's expensive, but it's going to lift her command by 3 points and have a whole bunch of benefits attached to it. I could save. I could shut down some mission control excess capacity, and I do have excess capacity. So that's definitely an option. Sparta Aerospace I don't want. That could be handy. She's not a criminal. I think this could be good to lift her command instantly. It's just, it is very expensive. I'm going to purchase this, and I'll go shut down some locations to compensate. I don't think I want the DEA, it's too expensive. I will equip I could give her that, but I'm not sure it's worthwhile. I can give her Tolliman products to compensate for the fact that she's operating that, but I kind of want to give her this. Now the question is, I can give her Tolliman products when she gets one more administration slot. So for the moment, we'll just slip Academos brands on, and she's pretty much ready to go. So there we are. We've surged our control point limit up to 392. She's introduced a whole bunch of additional benefits to us. She's more than paying. Her net income is 70.1. So her money-making organizations are out generating the cost of National Geospatial. I can go shut down some MC stations in order to partly make up for that. Huge stat bonus to her as a result. And we're going to try and push her to Command 25 as well. I want to level 25 command individuals, especially since she can also launch coups. Kind of handy. So there we are. Now we're going to be in the hunt for new countries because we have plenty of spare control point limit. We could do that by absorbing countries. We can do this by turning India's growth engine back on, which I suspect I will do. But I also think it's time to possibly throw the protector. Oh, no. Pick somewhere where the servants are that we don't want them to be and throw them out. Saudi Arabia for the protectorate or Iran for the servants seem like good places to start because they could become money factories for us, or I'm looking for an alternative MC source. Fantastic. That's a lot of CP limit. Like, I can do a lot of 14, 28, 28. I'll be over again, but I can do it. I think I should throw them out of the UK. I think I should throw the servants out of the UK. I think it'll take an awful lot of effort. They're democratic, they're integrated, they're very, very popular. But that might be a good medium-term objective. In the meantime, I can spend my CPs by throwing them out of like other places. Like I can throw them out of Iran, I can throw them out of Iraq, Oman, The Gulf states. Oh, wow. The Gulf states have 5. Yeah, we're screwing them in the Gulf states. Where's Max? 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 Max, I don't want the servants to have the Gulf states anymore. Because if we look at them, 18 to 26. Okay, so we're not going to put them over their MC cap. We're going to slow down their expansion in space by taking that away from them, and it's barely going to cost us anything. All right, we're going to stage a coup in the Gulf states, Dubai, easy enough. And I'm going to come up with a plan on how we potentially throw them out of the UK and decide whether at some point, well, no, I'll leave this as an open question to the chat, whether or not I should pick a fight with the resistance over things like Poland and Canada. And so the diplomatic counterattack begins. We've thrown a coup in the Gulf state, and Kamya is no longer working for the enemy, which means we can get in the business of turning their people now as well. I like this. I have lots of options here, as always. I am tempted to grab Unity movements at the very least, but for the moment, I think molten core fission systems to improve the global fission level by 1 is a good option. Railguns is a good option because I'd love to have orbital bombardment capabilities, which I do not have with my missiles. Picking up, there's all sorts of good stuff here. I'm skipping electromagnetic and electrothermal propulsion for the moment. Give me a second, I'm going to consider some options here by looking at my tech tree and planning where I want to go next. So this isn't particularly significant or particularly impressive, but the United States has now crossed 1,000 research point output per month, which is kind of cool. India, meanwhile, is pumping out a cool 532.9, not bad. India's also just ticked over to low levels of inequality. We'll let that go a little bit further, and then, actually, you know what, we're going to do that. Even more knowledge for the knowledge gods. India will into science. I would start the economic growth engine again. I probably will shortly. I'm just leaving CP cap open because, as you can see, I've started working on the United Kingdom. I think with the right combination of Max boosting unrest and our best persuasion characters building some public opinion, we might just be able to coup the thing. And you know how much I love a good coup. And right as I hit the button to stop, I'm not sure this has ever happened to me. I didn't get the first human warship achievement because the Resistance has launched one first. I've been sitting waiting to design something that I think is actually useful, and as a result, the Resistance has gazumped me and gotten into space first. So around their orbital core here, we have Romeo 1. I'm not sure we didn't have any details on what Romeo 1's actual situation is, but launching from Comte de Grasse station, we have a vessel, 18 combat power. Let's have a here it is. And I reckon that's an okay design. It's got 9.3 thousand delta V, which is not bad. I clicked away from it. Let's zoom back in. I could go through the fleet menu, but I'm interested. Okay, so it's an interdictor. It's got enough delta V to maybe make it to the moon, but most importantly, it's got enough delta V for orbital defense duties. It's got a 30mm autocannon for close-in defense work, and it's got a copperhead missile bay with a water heat sink. So no replace. This is just as cheap as it possibly gets. The engines are Nerva, 6 tubes of Nerva drive, which is the early nuclear engine I recommend if you're launching a ship that needs a little bit of range early on. It's an engine that I think was originally designed in the 60s or the 70s. Lithium-ion battery, so basic battery tech, a titanium array radiator. This thing's not incredible, but it's got 5 silicon carbide nose armor, a copperhead missile, and a close-in defense weapon, and a decent delta V. This is not bad. The AI used to build terrible ships in the beta. This is not terrible. It's not as good as the ones we're going to be designing as soon as I finish Adamantine Armor, which we'll be finishing in August, which is the last element holding up my ship design. But there you go. The Resistance actually beat us into space. Here's hoping that means that they're who the aliens shoot at first, considering the fact that there is currently a destroyer in orbit. Alright, so we have adamantane armor, which means it's finally time for me to talk about ships. I'm going to put advanced pulsar drive here. This is our next generation of engine after the existing pulsar drive, but I see no reason to wait. If you're always waiting for the next piece of equipment that you can put on a ship, you're never going to launch anything, and we don't need a whole fleet at this point. We just need one specific design for a limited purpose. So let's talk ships and let's talk strategy in the early game for a moment. There's this thing over in the Intel screen that I've introduced before. It's the estimated alien threat level. Colloquially, you might see people refer to this as the hate bar. If this goes too high, you piss the aliens off enough that they will stop, let's just say, focusing on infiltration and quiet subversion, and instead come and make their power and presence known. So whatever you do is going to against them is going to cause that bar to go up and then slowly go down. Except having a presence in space, so using mission control points, also causes hate, or these bars. So my bar is probably never going to go down below 3 bars because I've started to build a significant space presence. This makes sense, right? If the aliens see you industrializing space, they're going to have to do something about it past a certain point. Otherwise, there's a risk that you do grow out of control and disrupt whatever their fiendish plan is. So ideally, what I want is to be able to build a small force that can accomplish certain goals while not using up so much mission control that the aliens just completely go crazy on me, because I want to be able to do things to them, like assassinate or capture their individuals, without causing this to go too far into the red. So I'm going to sort of stop making new stations at this point. I may even sell one or two because I'm going to need some mission control available in order to produce some ships. So when we talk about ships, and I'll open the ship design structure in a moment, I will do a full guide, I think, on ship design in this game, particularly early game ship design. There are two sorts of ships that I think you need in the early game. There are probably more than a dozen different types of ships that are useful as the game goes on, but at the start of the game, I would recommend, this is not the only option, two particular designs. The first is a point defense monitor, a static defense monitor, a ship that is only designed to defend one place. You're eventually going to want those for at least Mercury, Mars, and Earth in this scenario, I think. But initially, all you're really going to want are ships that can go into orbit of Earth and shoot down one alien ship, maybe two, in order to get the capture alien technology objective. So you don't need something with a whole bunch of Delta V, you don't need something with a whole bunch of range. What you need is a whole bunch of weapons that are good against early game alien ships or against other human targets, are relatively cheap, and have enough thrust and mobility to hit targets in the atmosphere, but don't have the range to go anywhere else. That's ship one. Ship two is a colony ship. I'll cover that in a separate episode when I build one. Colony ships need two things: really, really, really long range, which comes from having a specific sort of engine, and a colony module, so that instead of boosting a colony module from Earth, you fire off a colony ship and it can found a colony at like Saturn, for example, if you want to go out far early. The engines in Terra Invicta, there's a number of different propulsion lines, but generally this is the basic trade-off. Actually, no, I'll go into the design screen and show this off. So let's design a ship, and we'll show off some engines in the process. So a colony ship would be cheap, long range. We're not going to design one now. What we're going to design is an Earth defense monitor, and for this, battleships, monitors, those sort of ship classes, absolutely the way to go. What I think you want is as many weapon slots as possible in as cheap a design as possible. The monitor has 4 hull weapon slots. Hull weapon slots are great for mounting missile launchers, and missile launchers, I think, continue to be one of the great early game weapons. The reason is, early alien warships don't carry much armor and don't have much point defense and don't come in large numbers. Missiles are incredibly effective against ships that have little point defense, no armor, and are available in small numbers, because no matter how advanced the enemy's technology is, missiles tend to do things like curve around the targets and impact side armor, and they can make a real mess of early game alien ships. And if you just launch enough of them, well, then you're golden. Later on, against true alien warships with good PD, missiles really have a hard time. But early on, there's a lot of different missile designs. I like the Copperhead. It's nice and balanced, but there are other designs you can use as well. You can also get missiles that are designed to shoot down enemy missiles or fire at their targets. I think they're called rattlers. They're reasonably useful as well. So step 1, missiles. Other primers on missiles, and I'll do a ship weapons guide at some point, I'm sure. That'll be a relatively short topic, but here are the basics of missiles. Missiles are very, very strong in the early game. They're strong against specific targets. Their weaknesses are enemy point defense, and secondly, ammo. They don't carry many reloads, which means if you fly out and you're on the offense and you're nowhere near a supply depot, you can't resupply those missiles. One engagement, usually, a missile ship will fire its entire payload. So if you have one battle fire your entire payload and the aliens manage to engage you again, you're just going to lose your entire fleet because alien ships have this huge stock of Delta V. They can chase you down. They will run you down. Physics is not your friend. Sir Isaac Newton will kill you in the cold depths of space. So missiles are ultimately a defensive weapon, I think. They're ideal when you're fighting close to home. So that's the weapon. Then you need a drive. Arguably, this is an even more important choice than weapons in terms of determining what your ship can do. The balancing thing you're looking for in engines is what is the thrust value? This is how fast your ship can accelerate or decelerate. So a low thrust value means that your ship has to make a very, 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 very long burn in order to change speed. It's not very maneuverable. If a missile is coming your way and you have low thrust, you're going to die. Exhaust velocity and power use efficiency are basically impacts your range. Exhaust velocity is how much energy you're going to derive from your fuel, essentially. It's how efficient, how long-ranged your engine is. Power use efficiency has to do with how effectively you convert the power of your reactor into propulsion. The third thing you have to balance is propellant. Does it use water? Does it use volatiles? Does it use, in some cases, fissile material, if it's like the Orion drive and it works by detonating nukes behind the ship? So at the start of the game, you'll find that you have some of these chemical rockets, for example, that have incredibly high thrust ratings. So if I put 6 versions of this, you'll see that I've got combat acceleration on this thing of like, I can get 4 Gs out of this thing under some circumstances. I can get combat acceleration of 2 Gs with a reasonable number of propellant tanks. Like, this thing can really motor, and this is a basic tech level 1 engine. I throw a nuclear engine on this thing, all of a sudden my acceleration is measured in milli-Gs. It's tiny. I can kick this up to 148 milli-Gs. It is a decimal rounding error next to these chemical rockets. The difference is, suddenly I've got 11 kps delta V. I can fly a lot further. The nuclear engine is more efficient than the chemical rocket. What this does mean is that if you are engaging an alien warship and it's, for example, got a missile-based arsenal or it's got weapons that can be dodged, ironically enough, humanity's basic bitch chemical rockets, and there are a couple of them. I haven't researched many, but you can research, if you want to, some pretty good chemical rockets. They can really cause your ships to pull some incredible evasive maneuvers. But you can't pull many of them, otherwise you're going to run out of fuel, and if you run out of fuel in space, you drift until you die. So the engine affects the characteristics. Some engines are incredibly efficient, some are very good thrust, some have a balance between the two. Colony ships use high efficiency, low thrust engines. I'm using the pulsar drive. The pulsar drive is balanced. 7.6 thrust gives it some combat ability, especially when you go to 6 and bring it up to 10.2 thrust. So it's not a chemical rocket, but it's much, 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 much more efficient than a chemical rocket. So I can dial down the propellant tanks. This reduces weight, which basically makes everything better but decreases range. So that's your engine. I choose the pulsar drive. It needs a power plant. Ordinary rockets will often use fuel cells. We use a solid core fission reactor to provide power to the engine. Simple enough. Also power to all the other ship systems. So there we are. We've got a reactor. We've got an engine. Next thing you need is a battery. So ships during combat will often draw more power than the reactor can provide in real time, so you use a battery. I've got a lithium-ion battery with 30 tons, or I've got a quantum battery with far greater capacity, but it weighs 80 tons. That said, it's not that much difference in weight in the grand scheme of things, so I'm going to mount the quantum battery. Hopefully you're with me so far. Then you need a radiator. So normally, in reality, you're surrounded by air, which allows heat to transfer from your body to the surrounding environment. You radiate heat very efficiently on Earth. In space, you need radiators with large surface areas in order to dump heat, and your ship is going to generate a lot of waste heat, especially if you're using things like lasers or magnetic accelerators, and you've got big-ass reactors tied to big engines that are not perfectly efficient. You're going to generate waste heat. Well, you need a radiator. You start with aluminium fin and titanium array radiators. The balancing factor in radiators is usually how heavy they are relative to how much heat they can dump, and then how vulnerable they are when deployed. Because in combat, you can choose to suck in your radiators in order to protect them, but they're not doing their job, or you can extend them to dump heat, but they're vulnerable to enemy fire. So, aluminium fin radiators are very vulnerable to enemy fire. Titanium array radiators are only highly vulnerable to enemy fire, and I've just unlocked nanofilament tube radiators. These are moderately vulnerable and they're lighter than the other options because they're more advanced. So let's whack one of those on. We now have a radiator. Then we're pretty close to a ship that is functional at this point. The only other thing that you need to add is an armor type. At the start of the game, you have steel. You can put steel armor on your ship. You have a front slot, a flanking slot, and a back slot. Different armors have different materials, they cost different substances, they have different advantages. So, for example, steel is 184 tons per armor point, but it's resistant to chipping. Chipping is the process wherein armor gets worn away over multiple hits and becomes less effective. Titanium armor uses rare materials, so noble metals instead, but it's lighter. And then you've got armor like boron carbide. This is extra resistant to kinetic damage, but it goes back to being pretty heavy. We've just unlocked adamantane armor. It has a bonus resistance to kinetic, but most importantly, it's a fraction of the weight. Boron carbide armor is 176 tons to put 1 point of armor on the nose. Adamantane armor is 21 tons. So on it goes for all 3 slots, cost be damned. In terms of armoring, I only armor the nose in my initial ships. My initial ships aren't going to survive alien weapons much anyway. So all I'm going to do is armor the nose, stick the nose at the enemy. I'm not going to bother arming the sides because if you watch the weight, adding armor to the side of a ship gets very heavy very quickly. And you ultimately don't want to get shot in the backside anyway. So front armor only is an option. Otherwise you can do something like 5-1, but one armor is not going to do much anyway. This ship is now functional. Finally, you can add utility modules. Generally, you're going to want to add 1 heatsink. So this gives your ship heat sink capacity, heat storage capacity. If your radiators are in and you can't dump heat, the heat needs to go somewhere or the ship's going to overheat and bad things happen. So you want somewhere the ship can store heat. It can store it in giant pools of water, for example. So there's a 250-ton heat sink that is full of 250 tons of water here with a capacity of 100 gigajoules of heat. Or you can do a heavy one, which is basically double-sized, heavy lithium, and lithium. We're going to use a lithium heat sink. This saves us about half the weight on water, and it increases the capacity by something like 5 times. The only real cost is switching from using water to metals in order to build it. We have heaps of metals. It's just a more advanced option, so we will use it. One disadvantage, of course, is you can only refill something with an area that has that material available to it. That's almost never a problem. So I would just use the lithium heatsink. And then we have 2 slots available for a whole bunch of things that you will unlock. I've only unlocked magazines quite deliberately. Magazines give an extra full load of ammunition to each of your weapons. So we're going to mount 2 of them. We're going to carry a whole bunch of extra missiles. Normally, the magazine of a Copperhead missile bay is 10 missiles. It fires 2 in a salvo every 5 seconds. Do the math, in 25 seconds, normally your Copperhead bays are empty. This is going to give them the ability to fire for for 45 seconds. It's still something, it's a lot more firepower for relatively little weight. Awesome. This is now a functional, let's call this a fighter for immediate space defense duties. The last thing to balance is your amount of propellant. This is how much acceleration you want versus how much delta V you want. And of course, it costs more water to mount more tanks. So you're losing agility and you're increasing cost every time you increase propellant amount, but you're getting more delta V. If you're going to be doing stuff between the Earth and the Moon, you want about 10. For orbital stuff just about the Earth, I'm actually going to be happy with 6.2. I think that's enough. So it says there, ships with 5 kps delta V can make it to the moon one way. Ships with 10 can maybe make an interplanetary transfer from Earth. 6.2 for orbital operations gives me plenty of room for maneuvering in combat, and we're done. Awesome. So in true Australian standard, we're going to call this the Tasmania class monitor, and we are going to save design. It's got armor on the nose, but nowhere else. 4 sets of missile tubes, no defensive armament whatsoever, no point defense, a bunch of ammo, some heat sinks, some reasonably good technology, and decent acceleration. We are going to save the design. It has insufficient delta V for interplanetary travel. I don't care. Now we're going to build them. So we go fleet ship construction. We go ship construction, we look at the docks, and we find the ones that are in Earth. And we go add to queue on our 2 low Earth orbit bases. In 135 days, our first 2 Tasmania class monitors will be complete. I'm going to get a squad of maybe 3 or 4 of these and use them for their first interception. We need to claim some alien technology. That means shooting down an alien destroyer, but doing it without going over our MC cap too much. Victor 20 here should be done by then, but Victor 20 would have been a good target. Enemy surveillance missions are not your friend. The aliens in this game follow a very real economy with very real rules. They're not scripted, they don't cheat. That's why the event that I had that damaged the aliens so much damaged them so much. It's why they put out a patch to stop the 1 in a million chance happening to anyone else. And surveillance missions are an important part of their nefarious plan. So we're going to go shoot one down. And we've got alien containment. Our architects have devised an alien containment facility that is disarmingly simple but a highly effective design. 2 concentric circles are placed at the precise center of a larger triangle. The inner containment chamber utilizes a particulate absorbing filtration system to protect against ferrocite release, so that we may safely monitor the entity from the outer circle. Each corner of the triangle houses a heavily armed guard post, the equal distance between ensuring that, in the unlikely event that a captive escaped, the other 2 can respond simultaneously. We've set up a facility that our eggheads claim will hold a Hydra safely contained. Filtration systems block ferrocites, and reinforced bars should be impervious to any attempts at a breakout. We've also installed anti-personnel mines within the cell, and I'm keeping hold of the detonator just in case. Hans Castillo, everyone. Great, so bring a Hydra in for questioning alive. And we've got directed energy warfare doctrine. I'm going to now do probably I'm going to do a rival law at this point, because I need to start working towards some very specific texts that I will talk about later. In fact, I'm even going to give that 3 priority. In terms of research down here, we're already doing... There's a couple of options. I want to get marine assault, perhaps. Research campus is also kind of cool. There's a lot of good stuff here. We don't need saltwater batteries. We're way past a lot of this tech. I bypass a lot of early tech. I only pick the stuff that I want to use. And in different games, I might pick that stuff because I'm using different techniques. This is just one particular tech set, which is another reason why I think this game could use a tech guide. All right, marine assault unit it is, but it's not getting prioritized. Advanced pulsar drive is. Yeah, like that. So we'll do Arrival Law, Advanced Pulsar Drive, Marine Assault Unit. I love it. Let's go. Also, I saw that the initiative, after all my umming and ahhing about what I was going to do, the initiative through... it's another alien agent arriving. Well, that's great. We can go capture him. So we'll go find that guy and bring him in for questioning. The initiative threw the resistance out of Poland, so of course we instantly went in and staged a coup, because that's what we do. Which means we may actually be able to grab Poland. We just need to unally the United States, unally the Czech Republic and Canada. We're already rivals with Russia. I mean, the totally benevolent and kind Eurasian Union. So we can throw the corpos out of Poland. We can declare war on Russia and go from there. What I'll do is I'll try and time this so Poland finishes its 8 7th mission control point, which I think is the maximum it can fit in one province, and we'll absorb that 8MC directly into our empire. At one point, I should potentially risk provoking the resistance enough to throw them out of this point and fully control the Eurasian Union, because it's starting to get pretty big and pretty important. Nowhere near as much as India, with its 500 plus science now, and low inequality. I'm kind of proud of that. But we are going to expand the Eurasian Union into Poland, which means potentially with future technology we could go as far as Germany, which would be a pretty interesting addition, considering it already produces almost as much research as our super federation. Interesting thought. In any case, I'm going to try and track down this alien. I'm going to hunt down the launch site and see where they pop up. I've got Kamya and Tomi inspiring each other. So they're just sitting in a room telling each other how great Humanity First is and how all the Xenos should die in the name of the Golden Throne. Meanwhile, Max is finishing off the job of taking control of the last control point in Poland. And then next turn, what I'll do is arrange for the circumstances for the potential absorption of Poland into the Eurasian Union, which before we're done is not going to be just the Eurasian Union. We need to get this democratization going, though. We need to push this into anocracy and then democracy. Absorbing democratic nations probably will help, but I'd like to see all of that improve going forward. Please don't hate me. The Corpos took it over first. I'm just saving Poland from the evil capitalists. Hope you all enjoyed. Our ships will be launching next time. We'll get to see them in action, hopefully. We'll go after our Hydra captive, and I'll see you all again soon.